I'm pretty sure the house across the street from ours was some kind of door, connecting our world to another, because every time someone moved in, they went missing. One of the families that moved in had a daughter that was about my age. Her name was Penelope. We rode the same bus, sat in the same seat, and had the same teacher, even sitting beside each other in class since it was arranged in alphabetical order, and we shared the first letter of our last name. The conditions were perfect for best friends. Her father had been transferred to another base out here, and they weren't staying long. She said her life was like a bag in the wind, hardly ever staying at one place for long. One morning on the bus, Penelope looked like she'd taken a ride in a tumble dryer. Her hair was coarse, matted, and twisted. I didn't dare ask her what happened. It was the boogeyman, I thought. Lord knows I was scared of the boogeyman at the time. We sat on the bus in silence all the way to school. Stepping off the bus together in the early afternoon, Penelope stood on the sidewalk facing her house, not moving. I watched her. She turned around and asked if she could stay at my house for the night. Cartoon Network was playing some reruns of Powerpuff Girls, one of my favorites. I loved Mojo Jojo. We sat on the floor of my bedroom watching the TV when Penelope finally told me what was happening. She peered down at her legs, almost sulking. "I don't want to go back home, Amber. If I do, we can't be best friends anymore." I asked her if it was the boogeyman, but she didn't speak again. It's the boogeyman, all right, I thought. Kids have a funny way of making sense of the world, especially when they still believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. To me, the boogeyman was the perfect explanation for what was happening. I remember staying up all night, staring at my closet, stuffing toys and blankets under my bed so that the monsters couldn't hide under my bed. My mother would always tell me that the boogeyman would get me if I kept acting up, and of course, I believed her. She stayed for another 3 days. My parents didn't mind, nor did they ask questions. I think they were just happy I had a best friend. Being a parent myself now, it's good to see your kid fitting in with others, even if it's just one other person. Being a kid sucks sometimes. It's always better when you have someone by your side. On the third day after school, Penelope and I were watching more reruns of Cartoon Network when my mother came into the room with a police officer. He knelt to the floor and looked at us, a look so sad but reserved, putting out his hand for Penelope. She didn't hesitate. Someone from her mother's work had called, same with her father's work, saying they were worried, how it was unlike them to not call in sick or without notice. Apparently, they'd gone missing. There was no sign they had packed up for some vacation, cars still parked out in the driveway in the garage. It was odd and unsettling to say the least. The police asked my parents and I questions about Penelope's parents, but it wasn't any help. Penelope had an aunt that would watch over her until the case was closed, so we said our goodbyes. Her parents never showed up. I watched their house from my bedroom window most nights, looking for a light, a shadow, but the only thing I ever saw was darkness. Another family moved in some months after the events that played out. No daughter this time, just 2 old retired folks looking to settle down in warmer weather. Soon, they went missing too. No explanation, no trace. Then, again. I was in high school by the end of all this. My parents decided to move out of fear that something was going on in the neighborhood, that maybe we'd be next. I'd say they were fearful of what they didn't understand. I know I was. I think back on this often, about the boogeyman, monsters under the bed or in the closet, and I think to myself how I've grown. Another part of me feels strange, I have to admit. Whatever that house was, a door to another world or not, boogeyman or not, the line between reality and fiction is blurry. I suppose there are many things we still don't understand, and we might be surprised to find out that life is stranger than we're made to believe. Take a walk through any prison, ask anyone what they're in for, and they'll usually start or end it with, "I didn't do nothing." It doesn't really matter either way. They can't change their situation, neither can I guess. But I really didn't do anything. I'm innocent. I'm not crazy. I'm not. I've been locked up, having served only 2 years of my lifetime sentence, but I'll be damned if I don't tell everyone what happened. I didn't kill my family. It did. Not me. Oh no, not me. It was the oldest in our neighborhood, a Victorian-style home, records dating back to the mid-19th century. I remember my wife, obsessed with anything considered antique or odd, telling me how perfect it was. Aside from the aged look, the inside was fairly well maintained, minus a few cobwebs and the dust you could see drifting through the air when the light shined through the window. It sure wasn't lived in, and I sure wasn't in love with it, but I'd do anything for my wife. If I could get her back, I would. If I had just listened to what my heart was telling me the night it took my son, Benny, maybe I would at least have her. We'd arranged our things and been living in that portal to hell for about 6 months, when in the middle of the night, I'd heard footsteps, the sound of iron dropping with a heavy thud on the wooden vinyl planks, going toward my son's room. I listened almost incredulously until I heard my son scream. The door to his room was wide open, though I remembered shutting it after I put him to bed. Benny was hiding under his blanket with a flashlight, his shadow casting behind the beam. He started to scream. I attempted to calm him down, but he wouldn't stop shouting, "Closet! Closet!" There was nothing there, and a good turning on the light switch and flipping his mattress upside down or checking any vents wouldn't do much. It was an odd feeling being in that room, like the air was suspended, weighed lighter like some pressure drop. I asked Benny what he had seen, but he wouldn't talk to me. I carried him to our bedroom, still in awe of what happened. My wife never woke up. Then came the night of January 15th, 2022, only a week later. I heard Benny scream again. Quickly, something with the weight of a Clydesdale was pounding through the hall and down the staircase, ending in a loud crash and another scream. Only this time, it wasn't Benny I heard crying out. It was it. My wife woke up this time. I grabbed my Glock and made sure it was loaded. The steps leading downstairs were bent and jagged like something heavy had fallen down them. Blood traced and spilled all the way down to the bottom, where one giant deformed foot, about as big as my head, was printed. It looked bizarre. 3 toes that came to odd points, long and thin. The bloody prints followed to the front door, which was busted open, the striker and lock completely deformed and in pieces. I cleaned up the blood before my wife could see it. We never saw Benny again. This was the beginning of my crippling insanity. My wife was not the same. The light in her eyes faded, the color in her cheeks flushed. She'd become a zombie, a nervous wreck. The police had been looking for Benny, and day by day, my wife spoke as if he was still out there. "Benny's still out there, I just know it. Mark, we have to find our son." I couldn't stop thinking about the footprints, the blood, so much of it, gallons of it. I knew it wasn't Benny's blood. Whatever it was, it would be back. Something of that size would come back hungrier, meaner. It would finish its appetizer and come for the entree. I imagined what I'd do in that situation. I could try and kill it before it took my wife, or myself. My strongest weapon being a 10-gauge shotgun. I feared the worst, even considering blowing my wife's brains out and mine to spare us from the agony of whatever it planned to do. Wherever it took our son, I didn't want to go. I never did decide what I'd do, just slept with my pistol under my pillow, my ears on alert, waiting for it to come back. Days passed, then weeks. I began to sleep better, occasionally waking up to the house settling or the rattle of the wind running through the cracks of the bedroom window. Eventually, my guard was down. I didn't sleep with a pistol anymore. I had gotten comfortable, right where it wanted me to be. In the middle of my doze, I felt the air get lighter. I remembered that feeling. I knew it was here. I just didn't know it was already in our bedroom. In the black, the bed rose at a tilt, then flipped from under us. My head struck the bed frame across my forehead, producing a thick gash that jetted blood like a sprinkler along the wall and the floor. My wife landed on top of me, hissing in confusion, then to a hysterical scream. I still couldn't see anything, and with my forearm pressed against my forehead to stop the blood, I reached up with the other to turn on the lamp on the nightstand. It had my wife by her ankle, her head only a foot off the floor, dangling her like a child might hold a lizard by its tail, squirming and twitching helplessly. It began to eat her toes one by one, crunching and swallowing them whole. I couldn't bear to hear her screams, and I decided to do the unthinkable. I pulled my Glock from the nightstand drawer and put a bullet in her head. It quickly dropped her dead weight to the floor. Whatever it wanted it alive. It wanted something warm to feed on. Soon her body would be cold, and nobody wants to eat something cold. Even I can understand that. I was the next hot thing on the menu. Order up. I put the pistol under my chin and slunk back against the wall and onto the floor. I wasn't going to let it take me. I had just killed my wife, lost my son. My entire world had been taken from me. Before pulling the trigger, it seized my arm with a crushing grip, causing me to drop the gun as it lifted me up, face to face with it. It licked the tears from my eyes. I could smell the blood in its breath. It spoke in Benny's voice. "Daddy, I'm scared." There was a siren soon after, and with that, it was gone, like a desert mirage. I dropped to the floor and immediately knew how it all looked. My wife was dead on the floor with a bullet in her head. The only other person in the house was myself. Domestic homicide, and that's exactly what happened.